What's going on, everybody? It is the one and only Q here from Retro Q Gaming, and well, here is the topic that everyone wants to hear, everyone wants to talk about, everyone wants to debate about, understand, opine on, whatever your preferred term is. Now, we're going to talk Cyberpunk 2077, because as we know, Cyberpunk 2077 released a few days ago on Xbox One, PS4, and of course the glorious PC Gaming Master Race. It is important to note that as we go forward and talk about everything in here, there is no proper dedicated next gen, or rather current gen version just yet. In fact, there is an upgraded patch version just available for the Xbox Series MES consoles and the PlayStation 5. However, they are still running backwards compatible versions of the old console version, if you will. It gets so confusing talking about these pleb consoles and pleb boxes, all of them, both 7th, 8th, 9th gen. It's just a disaster. They're all a low-powered, underpowered mess at this point. But anyway, let's talk Cyberpunk. Of course, Cyberpunk has been delayed multiple times, which we'll get into more detail in a little bit, and it's finally released. And it seems like an almost amazingly broken mess. Like, to the point where it's almost impressive that they've fucked it up this much. Now, we've seen an apt comparison out there. I don't fully agree with it, but we have Cyberpunk 2076 in reference to how broken Fallout 76 was in comparison. But I will say this, from what I understand, I haven't played either game, but from what I understand, it seems like Cyberpunk 2077 is slightly less broken. It's maybe 10% less broken, or 10% less poor, or 10% whatever than Fallout 76. That game was like legendarily broken, and oh, it was awful. Now, like I said, Bethesda tier, possibly even worse in some cases. I say some cases because, of course, you've got Fallout, you've got Fallout 4, Fallout 3. I mean, to an extent, New Vegas. You've got Skyrim, you've got Oblivion. Many of these games were legendarily broken in their release date. And Cyberpunk 2077 beats out some of them in how broken it absolutely is. And it really makes you think. Because, like we mentioned, since it was meant to launch back in April, and then it was delayed to September, and then it was delayed to, was it October? November? I can't remember which it was. And then it was delayed to December. Imagine that. Imagine this game, in its current state, was supposed to launch. Think about it. This game was supposed to launch 8 months ago. Imagine how poor and how far back it was 8 months ago. And that's something that's important to remember a little bit later. But it really, really highlights a couple of other things. One of them is basically forcing something to hit a deadline. Over quality control, be damned. It's just an absolute, we're getting this out there. We're getting it out for Christmas. I mean, think about it. Launching a big hype game like this at not only Christmas time, but in a market where the current consoles, or rather the previous consoles, had a roughly 150 million share. Over 100 million of them being PlayStation 4, and about half of the, well, I guess half of their sales being the Xbox. And of course the millions and millions of PCs. In fact, to the point where Cyberpunk actually went out and confirmed that the game sold 59% on PC and 41% across all consoles. And at the time of that statement, that was 8 million sales. Imagine that, 8 million sales. That's to the point where they recouped all development and all marketing costs in a single day. By launch day, they were instantly profitable. It was that big and that hyped. And you know why that's a bit of a problem? Because they showed you, and you only saw what they wanted you to see. They just showed high-end PC footage the entire time, which is why it looked so damn good. Now, these notes that I have here are a bit weird and all over the place, because they're dated a little bit strange and stuff has changed. It's mainly because the whole situation surrounding Cyberpunk is really, really, really fluid at the moment. It's all over the place. It's changing not only day by day, it's changing almost hour by hour at this point. I will say this, I refunded my copy. I've mentioned this several times already. In fact, I refunded my copy of Cyberpunk 2077 weeks ago, when it was delayed because of the piece of shit old consoles. And I just said, because CD Projekt Red came out and said that the PC version is essentially finished, essentially, we saw how that went anyway. But the point is, they said it's basically finished and that they need to delay it to... They kind of hinted and talked about old console optimization, and well, we saw how that got them and all as well. So I'm glad that I'll be getting it next year at some point, cheap in a sale. I'll be able to play it when it's possibly, hopefully, finally finished and optimized with my lovely Ryzen 5900X and my RTX 3080 or 3080 Ti, or hell, I might even break down and just get a fucking 3090 at this point. But like I said, maybe it will be finished by then. Now, it is not only incredibly buggy, but I want to talk a lot about the last generation console version of it here, because it's unbelievable how poor it is on not only all last generation consoles, not only the Xbox One X, not only the PlayStation 4 Pro, but especially the PS4 base and the Xbox One/Xbox One S versions of this game. They are diabolical. If you look at these versions of this game, they are running as low as 720p, sometimes lower, and dropping to 15 FPS, all while your settings are cut beyond the lowest point. That's right, they're running lower than low. If you look at side-by-side comparison shots of these games, they are Switch tier port bad. It is almost an entirely different game when you look at these. It is that much of a difference. It is legendarily bad. In fact, it's so bad that CD Projekt Red even had to come out and issue several statements about the whole situation. Mainly because there was a weekend in between launch and they finally posted it this morning on Monday morning. It's a bit of a rough one here, because they've basically come out and outlined that there will be 2 upcoming major patches to the backwards compatibility version. They won't even be the proper true next gen or current gen versions, but it's all just the backwards compatible stuff. There's going to be a major patch in January and a major patch in February. But even having said that, there's not even going to be a vast improvement, simply because the consoles can't handle it. But not only that, over the weekend we've also seen another statement that has kind of gone low-key under many people's radar. But as we all know, I see all, I know all. And CD Projekt Red have even said, low-key, that the proper true current-gen version for the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series S consoles may or may not even launch in 2021. So it's not even a guarantee, if you paid €500 for either of those 2 companies' new boxes, that you're not going to get a guaranteed release date of the current gen version on that system. You may be waiting over a year for it to come. But it all stems from another important thing as well. Now, this next one is common in marketing for many, many reasons, and frankly, it's pretty obvious. But if you fell for it, well, you've got no one to blame for yourself, rather no one to blame but yourself for being an absolute mark. And chances are you're probably a console fanboy anyway, and you deny logic and power and whatnot. But hey, you suck on Mark Cerny, and who else do we have? Aaron Greenberg and Phil Spencer. You do what you gotta do. Meanwhile, we'll sit here with logic, laughing at that. But the point is that CD Projekt Red purposely hid last generation console version gameplay. Out of pretty much everything they've ever shown over the last couple of years was all showcased on a top-of-the-line PC 99% of the time. There were 1 or 2 instances where they showed a little bit of it off fairly recently, and it was pretty small when I say that. But it was instantly apparent how bad this was going to be. In fact, it's arguably worse at launch, because they could still control what they put out. They probably ran that 100 times and chopped out the little best bits and showed you that. And it's even gotten so bad that Part of the statement that was put out today was suggesting your course of action from CD Projekt Red. One of them, they suggested if you want, you could still wait for the patches upcoming in January and February to help alleviate, hopefully at least anyway, some of your problems, some of your concerns, and many of your issues. Or they've even said that you should try even refund it if that's the case. And they've suggested multiple different ways of doing this. If you have a physical copy, go back to your local store or talk to whoever it is online where you bought it and whatnot. If you have a digital copy too, well, you know there's more limited options if you run on a pleb box. I'm sorry, a console I believe they're called these days. But we all know, which we'll get into now in a minute, just how poor refund situations are on pleb boxes. So CD Projekt Red have even set up a dedicated special email address for themselves if you can't seem to get a refund for whatever reason or whatever version, and you can try contact them and they can try help you. And as far as refunds go from the pleb boxes, it's kind of weird because so far the overwhelming majority of reports for Microsoft stuff on the Xbox seems to be that Microsoft will refund your game because it's so legendarily broken. I've seen by comparison dozens and dozens and dozens, arguably hundreds at this point probably if I properly tallied it up, of people saying that they got a refund from their Xbox copy digitally from Microsoft with no problems at all. And then you see one people who have suspect timelines because they praise Sony a lot and they just say, oh, Microsoft denied my Xbox thing and their Xbox refund, but that's like the very first time they ever talked about anything Xbox. It's kind of suspect. Whereas on the Sony front, it seems to be 50-50. You have a bunch of people saying that it's like, oh, well, Sony approved my refund and there was no issues. But you also have a significantly large amount of people that I've noticed as well. Again, roughly 50-50, I'd say, that are saying Sony are denying it. To the point where they're actually saying, the customer service rep is saying that even if the developer says approve any refunds, that Sony will still not approve them. And they're saying, hey, well, you're stuck with the game, maybe we suggest that you wait for the patches and whatnot in January and February. Again, we all know Sony gets a lot of defense force for this shit, but Sony is typically one of the worst companies to deal with when it comes to anything outside of their games. But of course, that's not to say the PC version is completely perfect, because let's face it, the PC version is still not very well optimized from what I hear. If you have an AMD CPU, even if it's some beast Ryzen CPU or whatever, apparently the performance and threading on there isn't optimized very, very well. However, it's done very well for Intel stuff. Of course, not only that, but the game is an absolute buggy disaster. Now, of course, being on PC, some mods have already alleviated some of the smaller issues. And because we have the vastly superior CPUs and GPUs compared to laughable consoles, well, we can just kind of brute force a lot of the way through it as well. But that doesn't change some of the fundamentally broken stuff, no matter what platform you're on. And when I say fundamentally broken stuff, there's a significant amount of it. But on the refund front, since PC gaming is superior in every way, refunding on PC isn't really too much of an issue because a lot of it has proper options and whatnot too, unlike Microsoft, unlike Sony, and unlike Nintendo. Although Nintendo are just completely irrelevant to this conversation, I just felt like I'd bring it in because they're such a shit company. In practically every way. Now, everyone's always going, good guy CDPR in this case, but no, not at all. CD Projekt Red do not get a pass on this. If you're the type of person to give them a pass on this, you're a fucking hypocrite. Especially because you're probably the same type of person who, if EA or Ubisoft, Take-Two, literally any other developer who release a game in a state like this, which many of them have already. Look at many of the Assassin's Creed games, hell, look at some of the Watch Dogs games, The Division, look at some of the Red Dead Redemption 2 didn't even have a great PC launch, and pretty much anything from EA. They all fuck up royally. And if you're crucifying them, which you likely are, then you're a fucking hypocrite if you're not crucifying CD Projekt Red. But Q, The Witcher was fairly glitchy. It was the glitcher tree when it first came out as well. But we stuck by it and they fixed it. That's not the point. Their onus on you is to deliver the product for your money. And what are they delivering for that? Just like Cyberpunk, they're giving you absolute pre-alpha shite for your money at launch. Remember, this is something that's been in development allegedly for years. And this, even after years and years and years, involvement from major publishers like Bandai Namco as well. and multiple delays, and this is what they have to show? This is what they forced out. And just like their bullshit and their fake statements and their bullshit lies and all as well, and their hiding of the last gen versions of the game and whatnot too, it all comes down to something important. Remember the last delay about a month and a half ago? The reason why I cancelled my pre-order at the time. And shortly afterwards, maybe a day or two later, maybe it was even a week later, I don't remember the exact timeline at the time, but that delay, shortly after, CD Projekt Red even came out and said that the delay was not because of last-gen consoles and that it runs surprisingly well on last-gen consoles. And here we fucking are. This company is a business first and foremost, and they're looking to fuck you out of your money as much as possible.